Today we will study Logic 2, Syllogism, Moods and Enthymemes. Let us understand what is syllogism. It is a deductive argument in which the conclusion is deduced from only two propositions. Syllogisms are of three types. First is disjunctive syllogism, the second is hypothetical syllogism, and third is the categorical syllogism. In this chapter, we will be studying categorical syllogism. Now let us understand what is categorical syllogism. It is a deductive argument, that is immediate inference, which consists of three categorical propositions that together contain exactly three terms, each of which occurs in only two of the constituent propositions. Now let us understand first the types of categorical propositions. The first is a proposition, universal affirmative proposition, in which the class of subject term is wholly included in the class of predicate term. Then E proposition, universal negative, where the class of the subject term is wholly excluded from the class of predicate term. Then we have I proposition, that is particular affirmative, where the class of subject term is partially included in the class of predicate term. And we have the fourth is O proposition, which is particular negative, where the class of subject term is partially excluded from the class of predicate term. Now let us take an example of categorical syllogism. All fruits are ripe. All apples are fruits. Therefore, all apples are ripe. All the three propositions are A propositions, that is universal affirmative propositions, where the first premise, all fruits are ripe, indicates that the class of the subject term, fruits, is wholly included in the class of predicate term, ripe. The second premise, the class of subject term, apples, is wholly included in the predicate term, fruits. And in the conclusion, we have the class of the subject term, apples, is wholly included in the class of ripe things. Now we'll understand the terms of categorical syllogism. The first is the measure term, which is indicated by capital P. It is the predicate of the conclusion. Then we have the minor term, which is indicated by the capital S. It is the subject of the conclusion. And then we have the middle term, which is indicated by capital M. And it is the term which occurs in both the premises but not in the conclusion. Now let us understand terms with an example. All mangoes are ripe. Some mangoes are fruits. Therefore, some fruits are ripe. Now, ripe is the predicate of the conclusion. It is indicated by capital P. It is called the measure term. Then we have fruits, which is the subject of the conclusion, and it is indicated by capital S. It is called the minor term. And then we have the middle term, that is mangoes, which is indicated by capital M, which is in both the premises but not in the conclusion. Now we'll understand the propositions of categorical syllogism. The first is the measure premise. It is the premise in which the predicate, that is the measure term, occurs. And we have minor premise in which the subject, that is minor term, occurs. And then we have the conclusion, the proposition that is deduced from these two premises. That is the conclusion. So, categorical syllogism consists of three and only three propositions: the measure premise, the minor premise, and the conclusion. Let us understand the terms with an example. All bottles are transparent, or no bottles are large objects, therefore no large objects are transparent. Here the word transparent is the predicate of the conclusion and it is indicated by capital P. It is the measure term and it lies in the first premise, so the first premise is called the measure premise. Now large objects is the subject of the conclusion and it is indicated by capital S. It is the minor term and it lies in the second premise. So the second premise is called the minor premise. The conclusion is indicated by the word therefore. So therefore no large objects are transparent will be the conclusion. Now let us understand the validity of categorical syllogism. Before we go to the validity of categorical syllogism, we must understand the logical form of categorical syllogism. The logical form of categorical syllogism is, first will be the measure premise, the second is the minor premise, and therefore the conclusion. The validity of categorical syllogism does not depend on the logical order, but the validity of categorical syllogism depends upon the relation between the premises and the conclusion. Categorical syllogism is said to be valid when the premises imply the conclusion, and a categorical syllogism is said to be invalid when the premises do not imply the conclusion. Let us see the figures of categorical syllogism. It was Aristotle who has given three figures of categorical syllogism depending upon the position of the middle term in the premises. It was Galen who has added the fourth figure to the categorical syllogism. Thus, we get four figures of categorical syllogism. Let us understand the figures of categorical syllogism. See the figure 1. In this figure 1 of categorical syllogism, the middle term stands as the subject of the measure premise and the predicate of the minor premise. Let us take an example. All poisonous things are harmful. Some gases are poisonous things. Therefore, some gases are harmful. Here, poisonous things is the middle term, which stands as the subject of A proposition in the measure premise and as the predicate of I proposition in the minor premise. Thus, we get the figure similar to S. In figure 2, the middle term stands as the predicate of both the premises, the measure premise as well as the minor premise. Let us take an example. All tigers are wild animals. All cats are not wild animals. Therefore, some cats are not tigers. Here, the middle term is wild animals, which stands as the predicate of A proposition in the measure premise and it also stands as the predicate of O proposition in the minor premise. Thus, we get the figure as horseshoe or you can say D. The third figure of categorical syllogism, where the middle term stands as the subject in both the premises, that is the measure premise and the minor premise. Let us take an example. All teachers are trained, all teachers are qualified, therefore all qualified persons are trained. Here teachers is the middle term which stands as the subject of a proposition in the major premise and teachers as the subject of a proposition again in the minor premise. So both the premises it stands as the subject which is the middle term and we get the figure as C. Now we come to the fourth figure where the middle term stands as the predicate in the major premise and subject in the minor premise. Thus, let us take an example. All triangles are plane figures. No plane figures are hexagons. Therefore, no hexagons are triangles. Your plane figures is the middle term which stands as the predicate of the measure premise. Predicate of a proposition which is the measure premise and subject of middle term plane figure stands as the subject of E proposition in the minor premise. So the figure that we get here is Z. So we have studied here what is categorical syllogism. We have studied four types of categorical proposition that the categorical syllogism has, and also we have studied the figures of categorical syllogism. Thank you.